feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. All right, here we go. Episode 6 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. It is a bright and sunny day here, and I have to tell you, those are the very best kind in my book. I am so happy on a bright and sunny morning. I have hot coffee. I've got a great topic, so I'm ready to roll. Things have been a lot of fun in the Brilliant Balance world lately. I've actually had a number of great speaking engagements lately at companies who are so focused on the right things, especially something I'm passionate about, which is the retention and development of women leaders. You know, I spent a lot of my career in a corporate job, 15 years. Working at a big consumer products company. And honestly, I loved those years. I loved the pace and the challenges and the smart people. Just walking around the building, I worked at their corporate headquarters. Sometimes it felt like being in the West Wing. Everyone was kind of hustling, doing the walk and talk from meeting to meeting and getting things done. It was such a great experience. And I watch a lot of women reach some point in their career in midlife and decide not to stay. So, and I was one of them. And I'm going to tell that story today, but it is always exciting to me when I watch companies who are walking the talk and really doing what they can to create an environment where women can find a purpose-filled and flexible career path inside of a corporation. It's absolutely possible. It wasn't the right choice for me forever, but I have tons of friends still doing it. I love hearing their stories and watching their successes unfold. And a lot of my clients are in corporate jobs. So, today's episode is going to be about my journey into entrepreneurship and out of that corporate life. But it's just important to set the stage that it's not the only path. Very often, the right blend of elements can be found inside of a corporation, as long as it's one whose values and culture are aligned with the way you want to do business. So today what I want to do is I'm going to share my story about when I left my corporate life to begin life as an entrepreneur. And there were a number of reasons why I did that. But the biggest reason was this: the path that I was on was just no longer leading somewhere I wanted to go. I looked up and I looked at my boss's job, and then I looked at her boss's job, and I just didn't want that life. It was a combination of the work that was being done, like what were the day in and day out tasks I was going to be asked to do, the travel, the global nature of crossing multiple time zones all the time, and the lifestyle that went with it. I just looked at the whole package and said, I don't think that's for me. And after a few efforts to kind of figure out, was there maybe another path inside the company, this little spark was lit where I started to get more excited about some opportunities that were percolating in my own mind for my own business ventures than I was about anything I could see inside the company. For me, I never even really thought about going to another company. I was really happy at the one I was in. So it was either stay there and find the path or go out entirely on my own. So I resigned. I did it by choice. I did it without exit comp, like there was no package. Then, in the surprise twist, during my last week that I was actually working, so I had a little bit of a gap between trying to resign and actually leaving. I was finishing some projects. And during my last week that I was actually there, I found out that I was expecting my third child. Yep. So that whole next chapter was just full of lessons and growth and babies. Today, I'm going to share that story, including a few things that I wish I'd known back then, because all of this transpired 8 years ago. I want to give you some background so you can fully appreciate the story and then really unpack these lessons that I wish I'd known that might be helpful to you. So to get this started, you have to first realize how fully wired I was for the corporate life. I mean, practically from birth. If you'd known me as a child, you would have said, this is somebody who's going to work in a big company with a lot of structure in a leadership position. In fact, there's a kind of famous to the family story that I was visiting with my godmother and saw a picture of her that was taken in her executive office sitting behind a desk. And I sort of became obsessed with this picture, and that became the vision of what I wanted to do, that I wanted to sit behind a big desk and make decisions and, be a leader. I don't know where kids get those glimpses, but to me, that represented my aspirations of what I thought it meant to be a leader in business. Personality-wise, I'm pretty wired for, a command and control structure. I have deep respect for authority. And so I was a rules follower. If you gave me the rules, I knew how to follow them. I was a good test taker, all of those kind of things that put you in a situation where you can work in a lot of structure. And I'm like super competitive and driven, right? Really hardworking. So when I was in an environment where there were a lot of other people like that, and we were all chasing big objectives and pushing our own brands and portfolios forward, I was like a fish in water. But what I was also wired for was decision authority and leadership and purpose. And as I added a family to the mix of priorities, I was wired for time with them, really quality time with them. I had things I wanted to do as a wife and as a parent. And so at some point, the combination of factors that I could find in entrepreneurship seemed more fitting to the total lifestyle, including the business lifestyle that I wanted to operate within. I had gone through the same thing we all go through in corporate jobs, a lot of negotiating for resources and negotiating for team and priorities for your product or brand versus someone else's. And you don't always come out on the winning end of those. So despite a lot of work and effort, sometimes it gets scrapped in the name of a bigger priority for the company. And that was insanely frustrating to me, when it happened a number of times. So for me, the path to entrepreneurship was about, running my own show, having something I wanted to bring into the world and having full discretion over what that looked like. And then building it, with my own two hands kind of from the ground up. So it was an exhilarating vision of what that could be. But the way I got there was completely unexpected. It was unexpected to my family. It was unexpected, candidly, to me. I surprised myself because I leaped out into the world of entrepreneurship really without a net. I resigned from my job with a rough sketch of what I thought I would do for my first business, but I hadn't really tested the idea. I didn't really have proof of concept. I didn't have proof of market. That had some repercussions in the first business. So that's going to lead me to the first lesson. And I'm going to share 4 of them today, 4 things that I really wish I had known when I started this journey. And I want to share them with you because I think they may help you inform yours. Okay. The first one is you don't have to leap without a net. In fact, you probably shouldn't. When I left, like I said, I had sketched out a business plan and a website idea, and I had some thoughts on a certification program that intrigued me at the time. But I really didn't know what business I was going to start. I hadn't defined who I was going to serve or really what problem I was going to solve. And against all odds, I leapt out of this safe, secure, lucrative job without a net. It was kind of dumb, honestly, and I got lucky. So, and I had a really patient husband who stayed with me through the ups and downs of that first business venture while I was, first pregnant and then dealing with an infant, along with 2 other children. So today, when I'm advising women who are contemplating that leap, I tell them not to do what I did because there's really no reason to. There are hundreds of ways to prove out an idea and make sure it's viable, and that you like it and that your market likes it before you risk, everything to go after it. So just a couple of those would be a side hustle is my favorite term for it. Just something that you start up on the side in addition to your job to test the waters on how does it feel to do this thing, working on the idea a few hours here and there, design experiments where you put yourself maybe even for free as a volunteer into the environment you would be in as an entrepreneur to see what that feels like. If you think you're going to like working from home, maybe it's even just a day a week working from home in your corporate job to see what that environment feels like. So all of these things that you can do to smooth the path, they help you build up authority and demand and revenue, candidly, before you exit your day job. And it makes for a really much smoother glide path into entrepreneurship. It doesn't have to be this abrupt switch over from one to the other without some confidence that it's going to work, that you've proven to yourself that it's going to work. So that's the first thing.
Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
The second thing I wish I had known is you can have both money and a life. That old saying, I always think about the stick 'em up kind of movie where the guy's there saying, your money or your life. And sometimes I think that's how we frame the decision to be in a corporate job for a big company or a small company for that matter, working for somebody else against the idea of doing something on our own. We think of it as I can either have money working for someone else or I can have a life and some flexibility and autonomy and be excited and passionate about the work that I do. And I think my life in a corporate ivory tower made me feel like it was the only way to have a lucrative career, because everyone I knew was in a job like that. And everyone I knew who had fantasized about leaving saw themselves as ending up fulfilled, but poor. It was either money or meaningful, purpose-driven work. And, when you're raising a family and you're staring down college and ultimately retirement and you want to have a home and a car, you can't get around the fact that having an income, especially one you've gotten accustomed to, matters. So the truth is, it's been my experience that both and exists, right? It's not either money or meaningful, purpose-driven work. The goal is having both. Meaningful work can come while you're working for a company whose mission you believe in, is very dear to your heart. It could be lucrative work that you do as a purpose-driven entrepreneur. There's no vow of poverty that comes with starting a business, but I think there's so much in our cultural narrative about businesses that fail and what are you willing to sacrifice and trade off that we can get into this headspace of if I ever left my safe corporate job, it would mean I have to make a lot less money. And am I willing to do that? And, somehow I thought on some psychological level, you weren't allowed to have both. And because of that, I grossly underdeveloped my first business. I played way too small. I starved it from investment that it needed in order to avoid risk. And, I generally tried to make myself content with something that wasn't that much more than a hobby business. That's totally unnecessary. Once I broke that either or dynamic, then things really started to open up. And I started asking the right questions like, what would have to be true to love this business and how I'm spending my time every day and have it be as financially rewarding as a corporate job would have been? And I think that's what a lot of us are after. The third thing I wish I had known is that everyone around you is not a threat, Someone who has already done what you aspire to do is not a threat. It's not someone to, be in envy of. It's an ally. That person who has already done what you aspire to do can be an ally or a guide. When I was starting out, it's embarrassing to say, but any successful entrepreneur was kind of a threat, especially successful entrepreneurs who were in my space. I was most definitely never going to sit down and ask them questions or pay them for their advice. And this was probably the number one biggest mistake that I made. I was so committed to the notion, it was almost a value, of having to figure it out myself. Like there was pride in figuring it out myself, that I would spend forever trying to figure things out. I'd get a free download from someone and then sit there and try to piece together the rest of the puzzle. Or, I would listen to somebody's content or go to their website and think like, well, if they could figure this out, I can figure it out, quote unquote, for free, right? The idea was always I can figure it out by myself and I can figure it out for free. So being intimidated by these people who had achieved success in the area I was trying to achieve success was a giant mistake, because I made a lot of mistakes that I didn't have to make, and I went a lot slower than I had to go, right? And now what I know is that anyone who has had success in my space is a potential ally or a guide, someone that I can learn from, I can model after, I can be in community with. And not only is it an accelerator to the business, but it makes things a whole lot more fun to be in a shared commitment to a cause. And I think that brings me to the fourth point. The fourth lesson that I wish I had known when I was leaving my corporate job is you can always make back money, but you can't make back time. Related to the last point, when I think about how much time I wasted trying to save money by doing it myself, figuring it out myself, duct taping it together, it always sounded smart at the time so that I could keep more profit. But there were so many problems inherent in that strategy. One, I wasn't an expert. So I had to spend time learning before I could do it. I had to develop a process, figure out how I was going to do it before I could actually do it, right? And then doing it still took me twice as long. Slow, because I didn't have experience. And slow is bad in entrepreneurship, right? Time is money. Time is growth. Time is impact. And so every time a task is taking longer than it needs to, there's a cost. There's an opportunity cost to that. I think until I got good at making decisions from a different vantage point, from the vantage point of my future self, the one who had already succeeded at whatever it was. It wasn't until then that I could see just how much time I was wasting to save what ultimately amounted to small bits of money. When I was looking at a decision from my current situation, it always felt like, well, I'd rather save the money and do it myself. But when I could push out my vantage point and say, what would the person I will be a year from now do? It was always easier to say, you know what, I'd invest in acceleration. And it comes back to that notion that you can always make back money, especially if you're smart about where you're investing it, but you can't make back the time. So now that's almost my guiding principle. If I have the opportunity to solve the problem with money, knowing that it's going to come back to me through accelerated results, I'll make that choice every time. And honestly, the most successful entrepreneurs that I've come to know, the ones who are running big businesses that are well-oiled machines, they do the same. So let's recap. There's a few things we've talked about today, just in case you are somebody who's contemplating making that leap from corporate life to an entrepreneurial life. You learn these lessons from me, and you will absolutely start out ahead of the game. I wish someone had sat me down and told me these things back in the day. So the first one was you don't have to leap without a net. In fact, you shouldn't. There are too many ways to prove out the concept in the market before you make your exit. And you will have a lot more confidence when you do it that way. It's just a much smoother transition. Second one was you can have both money and a life. It's not an either or equation. And if somehow you've internalized it as either or, you really want to spend some time contemplating that and thinking about, is there another way for you to frame that, what would have to be true to have both and. The third thing is anyone who has already done what you aspire to do is a potential ally or a guide. You should be actively looking for those people. One, they are proof that the thing you're trying to do works. If somebody is out there being successful in the thing you want to do, awesome, right? And go seek that person out. Figure out how you can extract some of that experience and internalize it as wisdom for yourself, because it will help you go faster. And that fourth point was you can always make back money, but you can't make back time. So anything you can do that is an accelerator to your results, even if you have to invest in it, when you're smart about those investments and you do your homework before you make them, I would take that bet every single time, because the acceleration just becomes like this force multiplier in your results. The 4 lessons, there they are. And, since we just established that there's nothing more precious than time, and since we never seem to feel like we have enough of it, in the next episode, what I'm going to do is talk about the best strategy I know for getting things done in the time you have. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur or if you're working in a company. You probably have more on your plate than you feel like you can accomplish in the hours that you have. So this strategy that I'm going to talk about, honestly, it's the single most effective thing that I do personally to make sure I stay on top of my priorities. And it's something that I teach to all my clients in my coaching programs because it works. So don't miss that one. And that's it for today. I want you to make sure you head over to brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all. Grab that free rebalancing toolkit. It is a game changer if you are trying to get your arms around your life. And share this episode with somebody you know who is maybe thinking about taking the entrepreneurial path. Pay it forward. Till next time, my friends, go be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.